Hello and welcome to the live one. I'm your host, Priya David Clemens. Today is Tuesday, September 6th. It feels like we are already rolling into fall here. Paul Sloan, can you believe it is that time already?
I can.
You can. You've got girls who are going to school, right?
Yep.
Paul is the executive editor of BNet, and we are also joined today all the way from New Jersey. We're here in San Francisco, folks, by a former attorney and the founder of Ari Kaplan Advisors. Ari Kaplan is joining us today. Ari, thank you so much for being on the show.
Happy to be here, thanks.
And Ari just wrote this book that came out this summer. It's called Reinventing Professional Services. But what I love was your original title, is that right? White Collar Hustler?
Yes, the original title was The White Collar Hustler. I'm a kid from Brooklyn, and that always resonated with me in a very positive sense. But there were very few publishers that thought at that time when I pitched it that, oh yeah, everyone's going to buy a book called The White Collar Hustler.
All right, well, either way, white collar hustling or reinventing professional services, you're saying it's the same thing. So give us a quick nugget, a little snapshot of what this book is all about.
Essentially, this book can be kind of characterized with a little story. And I was doing a North American tour in June, and I got into a taxi in Minneapolis. And the taxi driver, we start talking, and he says, oh, sir, would you like a bottle of water? And I said, oh, bottle of water, this cold bottle of water in a little placeholder, and it's just a regular cab. And I said, oh, why would you offer me a bottle of water? And he laughed, and he said, to tell you the truth, it usually increases my tip by 10 or 15%. And in an instant, this taxi driver had reinvented what it means to drive a cab. And so this book is meant to capture that for professionals and often professional school students to kind of consider, what is your bottle of water?
So let me ask you, what does that question really mean? Does it mean what's the extra perk that you're adding? What is the value that you're bringing that maybe wasn't expressly on the table? What does it mean for you? You're an advisor to students and business professionals. What's your bottle of water?
For me, that's a great question, and it does mean that. It means what is the small thing, right? We think in terms of innovation. When your listeners, people watching this are thinking about innovation, we immediately, I'm guessing, we think of Steve Jobs, we think of the iPad. But I want people to think of it in terms of incremental innovation. The small thing that will make you slightly more memorable to your clients, to your prospects, to potential employers. So I'll for example, do an industry research survey. I'll interview a series of high-level professionals for one of my clients. And we'll do a webinar, and they'll roll it out, and they'll send out this print product. And then I will try on my own to perhaps reach out, not at the national level of an organization that caters to a lot of these prospects. I'll go to the chapter level, and I'll contact your local chapter in a particular state or a particular city, and I'll pitch them on my own, not as part of the fee structure, and say, hey, I'd love to do a webinar introducing some of the research that I've done. It's independent research. It's very interesting. It's very applicable to your audience, notwithstanding the fact that it's also sponsored by my client, and my client gets this extra benefit from my extra effort. And so for me, that's a real example of showcasing and demonstrating the water principle.
Hey, Ari, it's Paul. It seems like so much of your book is about personal branding and increasing your brand and using all the technology that we all know so much about these days. Who is it really aimed after? I mean, I'm wondering in what ways do you think people don't understand all these available channels that are out there now already?
The book is mainly targeted. I'm a lawyer and practiced for nearly 9 years in New York City, and the book is meant to address professionals, lawyers, doctors, accountants, architects, bankers, and students that are struggling to become those professionals. And the reason why I wrote it was because over the years, my first book is called The Opportunity Maker, and I've addressed thousands of professionals around the country. And ultimately, I would ask them, what has made you successful? I'd run into somebody, an accountant, a doctor, I'd say, what has made you successful? And often their answer was, well, I'm a hustler. That's what's made me successful. I hustle. And to me, that meant they were proactive, they were energized, they were excited, they were creative. And I wanted to give people a little bit of a roadmap for doing that. And one of the questions I ask is, who do you want to meet? In terms of your brand, who do you want to know about your brand, and who do you want to meet? And I get startling answers. Most of the time, the answer is someone that can hire me, someone that would like to work with me. Really generic, useless answers. The most frequent, the most common person that people I ask want to meet is Dale Carnegie. right? Dead Dale Carnegie. It's the strangest response, and I can't really figure it out. I mean, after Barack
Well,
Obama,
it's from the
I'm-
Think and Grow Rich book, right?
No, I know, but he's not alive. It's like I would love to have lunch with Gandhi,
Well-
but that's not happening, and it's not part of my professional character. What I really want people to start thinking about is, who is it that you want to meet? Like, what is the person's name? Where do they work? What is their job title? Why do you want to meet them? And then you can decide, oh, I can apply some different tools to meet them. But until you take that first step and answer that question, who do I want to meet? Then you can decide how you can meet them.
Well, let me piggyback on what Paul was saying about social
Sure.
media as well, because from what I've seen in your work so far, you're actually not saying accumulate a vast amount of Twitter followers and Facebook fans. You're saying that there needs to be a different level of communication. You talk about guest blogging, you talk about thank you notes in which you're offering to set up other introductions, that you're taking the next step.
It's a great point. So the art of introducing people is often lost. And I think that if I were, and when I follow up with somebody, and follow up is a lost art as well, but when I think of what to do, so people who are watching this, and they think of, well, what should I do? What's a practical thing that I can do after I meet someone or in order to meet somebody? Make an introduction. It's the easiest thing to do. There's no pressure to get it perfect. But if I had someone in San Francisco and I wanted to say, oh, you should meet Priya, and then all of a sudden I've connected you to someone, and that person may be a business executive, that person may be the head of a nonprofit, the head of an organization. You may be interested in meeting them, they may be interested in meeting you. It reflects very nicely on my character, because that's really what self-promotion is. It's not really about promoting me, it's about promoting the good work of others and letting that reflect back on who I am. And so those kinds of techniques can be done without technology. Technology is a great supplement. It makes it easier. It allows me to learn more about the people I'm connecting. But just technology alone is not going to be as successful as deciding how to use it and then execute it.
And we want to remind guests as well that you can join the conversation. There's a live chat window on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can be a part of our discussion. We'll bring any of your questions to Ari Kaplan if you just type them in right there. Paul?
So tell us, at what point should people be thinking about thinking in things the way you're talking about them, in terms of sort of being aware of your connections and your networking and how you're establishing your sort of everlasting online imprint? I mean, do you start thinking about this in college? Do you start thinking about this at the age of 12 now? How does it work?
You should start thinking about it as early as it feels comfortable to you, and here's why. So I was recently in Chicago, and a company had kindly sponsored a tweet up. After I'd done a program there, and they sponsored this tweet up to do a book signing, and the CEO invited people via Twitter. Just said, hey, we're going to have Ari Kaplan, and you're welcome to come and meet. And it was very kind of him. And so a young professional showed up who was not particularly interested in my book. I wasn't offended, but I signed a book, and we talked, and I said, why are you here? And he said, actually, I applied for a writing job with this company, and I began following the CEO of the company. And when I saw that the CEO was offering, an open invitation to this tweet up, I thought, wow, great way to meet the CEO and maybe some other folks at this organization. And of course, this was the only person who showed up who had applied for that job. And the CEO was very impressed and immediately introduced that individual to the person that was hiring for the job. And that's the way to create opportunity. He just simply followed the correct person, as opposed to a million people, or found some way to collect a million followers. For professionals, in many ways, there is a defined audience of people that we're trying to reach, right? If I'm an architect that specializes in certain kinds of residential housing in a certain city, well, there's probably a group of developers that I want to connect to. If I'm a lawyer who's handling certain kind of work, same situation. Same thing if I'm applying for a job. I know, I'm applying for a job in a certain industry with certain people who are hiring for that job. There's a finite audience. Then once you figure that out, start doing some of these other things.
Let me ask you, in some ways you seem to be talking about a marriage between sort of time-honored traditions of going and meeting people and working hard and getting yourself ahead in that way. You're also talking about marrying that to modern technologies. But in what ways do you find that people are making mistakes when it comes, especially to modern technologies? Where do you see them wasting their time?
All kinds of ways. I waste my time all the time with technology.
Okay, I'm not talking about just screwing around, and surfing the web when you should be working. I'm saying if you're focusing, right, you're using technologies that you think are going to help you. You're using focused techniques that you think are going to get you ahead, but they're not going to work.
Yeah, what are the mistakes? What are the mistakes people make? What mistakes have you made?
So the biggest mistake that people make is fear that it's not going to work. So one of the things I talk about is this principle of perfect imperfection, that many times and frequently you will be rejected. And that is just kind of the nature of business. That's the nature of life. You hear this principle all the time, except now I can introduce somebody via Twitter, or I can follow somebody and then start a conversation, and then for them to say, I'm not really interested in having this conversation with you. And that happens, or I'll email someone or I'll call them and say, I'd love to interview you for something, right? This is a great technique, to call somebody and say, I'd love to interview you for my blog, or I'm writing an article, or I'm guest blog posting for someone and I'd love to co-author that with you. Really very, very effective. People are flattered by it. They're generally going to be receptive to it, unless that person is, a celebrity or someone that's really not accessible for in kind of a standard kind of project. And so the mistake is that you give up. You reach out to them. I email you. You don't receive the email, or you don't respond to me, and I just assume you hate me. That's really what people think. I'll call somebody, I'll leave a message. For me, my voice is very annoying. I'm a guy from Brooklyn. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that sound. And then they decide, no, I'm going to give up. And that's the worst thing that you can do. And I often think of it in terms of missed opportunities as a way of creating opportunity. So I might reach out to somebody and I might say, hey, I'm going to be in San Francisco. I'd love to have coffee with you. And they'll say often, no, I'm busy. They'll come up with a million reasons why they can't meet with me. But frequently they will say, you know what, next time you're in San Francisco, we'll try to get together. So I try to remember that. And the next time I'm in San Francisco, I reach out to them and they generally are like, yeah, you know what, I respect that. And I've done a lot of research on this and have found when individuals are selecting professionals, high-level professionals for certain kinds of work, they will put these kinds of barriers in front of them. They will not take the first call. They will not respond to the first or second email. They want to see how proactive you will be and how creative you will be in approaching them, because they want to get a sense of how creative you will be and how value-oriented you will be in managing your time and in managing a project that you may work on with them. So it's frequently something that you need to get past in order to become more effective.
So definitely doggedness and hustling and persistence. What about when it comes to, let's say, the technologies that we think are going to help us, Facebook or Twitter, when you're putting out a message and saying, hey, follow this post, folks, is that effective?
What's effective is marrying those activities. So for example, if you had a LinkedIn group and you were using that group as a way to cultivate a community of people that were interested in something similar. So I have a group, it's about professionals interested in getting published and using that for business development. And I created this group and I invite 2 people to join this group, both of my friends. Only one thinks this is not a stupid idea and decides to join. And so now I'm sort of the emperor of my group of 1, right? I'm taxing this person, setting, just me and this person in a group. But over time, there are hundreds and hundreds of people now from all over the world who are part of this group. And so what I've done is created an opt-in platform of individuals. There aren't a million people, but there are way more people that I could create opportunity from. And so they're exactly the kinds of people who are attracted to the work that I do in the industries that I do that work. And so now when I have a Twitter post, or now when I'm doing something, I can share it with that group and then expand it out to a broader group. But I'm really interested in speaking to a defined group of people, and then they now have conversations amongst themselves. So there's lots of discussion going on that I'm not creating, but I'm responsible for. And that's a great way to leverage technologies, to provide a platform in which others, right, it's kind of the essence of blogging. I'm going to post something and then there'll be lots of commenting and then maybe there's a follow-up post. And that's what I really try to do. I really try to start a conversation. And when you're starting the conversation, people will look to you as a resource, and that's a key point. Are you a resource? And if you are, who are you a resource for?
Isn't there a fine line between coming across as an expert in your subject matter and as a salesman?
There absolutely is. And you need to walk that line, and sometimes you get it wrong. And I think people need to get a sense of that. But if you're sincere, and if you're genuine, and if people see you fail in the same way that they see you succeed, that's going to be your ability, that's going to allow you to be much more authentic and much more trustworthy in their eyes. I often talk about a webinar that I had done a webinar once, and I was so excited about it, and I had miscalculated the timing. So I was doing a live program and a webinar at one point, and I had, sort of within minutes of each other. So I ran downstairs to this hotel to do this webinar, and I'm on the phone. There was a 30-minute webinar. 20 minutes into the webinar, I see all these notes that say, can't hear you, can't hear you. I'm wondering, maybe they just can't hear me. And I notice at the top of the corner of the screen, it says start webinar. So I'm talking for 20 minutes in this hotel bar. Not a single person can hear anything I say. And I completely blew that. Like a total public embarrassment. But what was surprising to me was that when I apologized and I said I'm going to host this webinar again in a week, many of those people came back and forgave me for making that mistake. And so it's more important for people to worry about being true and being honest about what they're doing than to worry, am I selling something too much? I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's really depending on your relationship with your audience.
I think the bottom line you talk about is authenticity, and even with all the technology, that you don't need to have things be perfect. Webinars may go down, our Skype connection may fail, but that you authentically express who you are and your message.
That's right. And it's funny because I have a newsletter, and the most successful newsletters tend to be something about me. I'm doing this half Ironman on Sunday, this coming Sunday.
Nice.
I'm telling you, this is the longest this I've ever done. I'm so afraid that I'm going to just be that last person not knowing what to do. And I've shared that with people, and I'm surprised at the response of, as opposed to when I say, well, I have this book out and the book talks about it. People are much more interested in who you are and then how that relates, right? I mean, if I'm talking about being a hustler, that's an example in some way. It's got nothing to do with business, but it's got everything to do with character. And that fear and expressing that fear to people is an honesty that more and more is important in kind of the work that we do.
All right, we've got a couple questions coming in on the live chat window. I think Paul's going to bring you one of them.
Yeah, one person writes, hi, Ari, what are your top 2 takeaway tips for hustlers who are looking for jobs in this tough economy?
Okay, so my top 2 tips. Who are you, where do you want that job, right? I mean, that's a key point. I want to get a job anywhere. That's not good enough anymore. You need to figure out who is hiring for that job, and how can you then cultivate some sort of relationship with those people. So I'll give you an example. So I wanted to meet a series of people in my industry, in technology. There was a time where I'd done a bunch of interviews for CNET and talking about legal issues related to that. And so I decided to host a roundtable. I didn't really know what that meant at the time. I just thought it would be a very cool way to get all these experts that I was interested in, high-level heads of things, to talk to me. And they did. And so I would suggest to job seekers, first, figure out who the people are that you want to meet, and then maybe host some kind of a roundtable, an industry roundtable. Call an industry organization and suggest that you do a roundtable. And what that means is they have a newsletter. That newsletter almost always needs content. It's free. They're constantly having to send it out. Maybe you can get 5 of those people to talk about what's the fourth quarter going to look like. In whatever your industry is, what do you expect to happen in 2012? All you're trying to do is create some genuine connections so that when an opportunity arises, they're thinking of you. They know that you're somebody in the industry, there's somebody that's interested in what they do. So maybe some kind of roundtable. You can do this with a tweet chat, right? You can do this on Twitter, you can do this on Facebook. There are so many now, as opposed to when I did it with an article, and I had the privilege of doing that roundtable for what was then the Silicon Alley Reporter, which was a really fine magazine. And so that's something that you really want to be thinking about. So that's one big takeaway. The other is to create a group, to cultivate community of some of these people. I have found real success with my LinkedIn group, and I really like that. But you can do it through Facebook. You can create a fan page. But somehow listening to what issues are most interesting to your audience, and then kind of cultivating those people into that group, inviting them directly into that group. I have this group, and next week we're going to be featuring so-and-so who I'm going to interview via Skype just like this, or I'm going to interview with an audio program. There are free conference calling programs, right? I use Free Conference Pro,
Sure.
And there are ways that you can record that and then share that with people. So figure out how you can more directly reach out to the people who are going to be hiring for those positions.
All right. Ari Kaplan, thank you so much for the hands-on tips. We appreciate it. Ari's book is called Reinventing Professional Services, Building Your Business in the Digital Marketplace. Just came out this summer. Ari, thanks again for joining us, and good luck this weekend on the Half Ironman.
Thanks so much. And if people want to download some free resources, they can go to promotetoday.com. There's lots of free stuff there. And such a privilege to be on your show. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Paul Sloan, thanks for joining us here in studio.
Of course, always a pleasure.
Come on back and join us next week on Tuesday. We're going to be speaking with BNet blogger Jeff Hayden. That's next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, right here on BNet on the live one. See you then.